Today we are breaking down a bunch of fantasy football Hail Marys to help save your season. Today we're going to be going through flex plays, so 3 wide receiver plays, 3 running back plays that I like in week 7. We're going to go over streaming quarterbacks, streaming tight ends, streaming defenses, and streaming kickers for those of you guys that are in need of some production because you got some bye weeks or you have some injuries. Whatever the case is, we should have you covered today. First up is my wide receiver flex plays of the week. That is Jordan Addison is the first guy I'm going to be talking about. Wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings facing the Detroit Lions at home this week. All 3 wide receivers for the Vikings, Naylor, Jefferson, and Jordan Addison, have positive advantage matchups versus the Lions secondary. Terry and Arnold, Carlton Davis, these guys haven't been overly consistent this year, so I like the matchup as a whole in general for the Vikings passing game. Addison finds himself in a game environment also that has a 50.5 point over-under, 92% of the cash on the over in this game, and the Vikings are implied for 26 points at home, and they are favorites over the Lions versus an exploitable defense who is now without their best defensive player in Aiden Hutchinson. Jordan Addison posted excellent usage in week 5 before the bye, but it didn't result in a big game like we saw from him in week 4 when he had 22.9 PPR points. But in week 5, it looks like he finally fully came back from that ankle issue that he was dealing with in training camp, dealing with at the beginning of the season. 97% of the routes, 29% of the team's targets. I just want pieces of this game. So Jameson Williams, also a very good play. Of course, you're already starting Jefferson and St. Brown at the wide receiver position in this one, but Jordan Addison in a very good spot this week, should be fully recovered from that injury. Good game environment, good matchup, all things considered. It is a very, very easy smash play for Jordan Addison for me as a top 25, top 30 receiver on the week. Moving into my next flex play at wide receiver, we have Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins, against the Indianapolis Colts this week on the road. This has been one of the most horrific offenses we've seen over the last 4 or 5 weeks or so since week 2 when Tua suffered the concussion. It has been awful, right? We have not seen good quarterback play out of the Dolphins quarterbacks. However, coming off of a bye week, Tua is actually first eligible to come off of IR after this game. Beatable quarterback on the opposing sideline with Anthony Richardson, who has one of the worst matchups on the entire slate for fantasy quarterbacks. I like the Dolphins to have a bounce back this week. I think that Tyler Huntley can play some functional football, get Jaylen Waddle the ball, get Tyreek Hill the ball, have a little bit of a bounce back performance, finally put up, 20 points on the board or something like that. I would buy these guys now, and that includes Devon Achane. Go and send some offers because, like I said, Tua is eligible to come back this week. Coming off of the bye, I expect Mike McDaniel to just, dial it up and be the better play caller that we all know he's capable of being. We thought, or we knew coming into the season that Mike McDaniels was one of the best play callers in the NFL. So with a bye week now with some time to prepare, I think him and Tyler Huntley will look a lot better on offense coming out of this bye week. Definitely start the Dolphins wide receivers this week. They have the 20th easiest matchup for fantasy wide receivers, and in the last 2 weeks before the bye, Jaylen Waddle had a 30 and a 28% target share respectively, so I like the Dolphins to finally get back on track with Tyler Huntley in this one. DeMario Douglas going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars is my final flex play of the week here at wide receiver. The Jaguars are teetering on firing their coach. The Patriots have newfound hope with Drake Maye starting at quarterback for them, who threw 3 touchdowns and almost 250 yards in his debut against a very tough Texans defense, who is, a top 6 defense in pass DVOA. Jacksonville is a much easier matchup than the one that Drake Maye faced last week. Jacksonville is 32nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position, and DeMario Douglas was actually performing without Drake Maye on the field. He has been a top 30 wide receiver in 3 of his last 4 games, posting at least a 28% target share in week 3, in week 5, and in week 6. So knowing that Drake Maye is a very easy matchup and Pop Douglas has an easy matchup, I feel very good about the Patriots passing game for the first time really all season. I've been able to utter that sentence. So moving into the flex plays at running back, a couple guys that I really like this week, starting with Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Cleveland Browns on the road this week. The Browns are 14th against fantasy running backs, so they are a pretty, league average, a little bit below average matchup for Chase Brown. It's not like he's a smash play this week. However, the Bengals are 5.5 point favorites. They're implied for almost 24 points according to Vegas. Chase Brown played a season high 62% of the snaps last week. It was also the first game in which he has outsnapped, outcarried, and ran more routes than Zach Moss. A trifecta. We want that 3-down roll for Chase Brown, ideally going forward. He has been a top 20 running back in 3 straight games, and the Browns are a complete factory of sadness, so I don't expect him to put up much of a fight in this one. Should be a solid game script for Chase Brown and the Cincinnati Bengals, and it's also a good matchup for the Browns, or the Bengals passing game, which is great news for red zone opportunities and things of that nature. So even though it's not a great, matchup on paper for Chase Brown. I like their ability to move the ball, get some scoring opportunities, and we have seen Chase Brown command a little bit more of the red zone work as well. Zach Moss was coming into the game with the injury, so who knows if that's going to keep up, but I tend to think that Chase Brown has won out this backfield and is going to continue to do so for the rest of the season. So next up, we have Rhamondre Stevenson, my second flex play at running back, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. I mean, spoiler alert, I like the Patriots. I already talked about DeMario Douglas. It is a great matchup. Gibson was awful on the ground in week 6 versus the Houston Texans, and as I just kind of made reference to, the Texans defense, third best against fantasy running backs. The Jags rank 30th, so a much better matchup for Rhamondre Stevenson than what we saw from Antonio Gibson last week. Much easier matchup here. I think he is going to end up playing. He traveled to London. Obviously, this is the London 9:30 a.m. kickoff. If Rhamondre Stevenson wasn't going to play or was actually in danger of missing, he probably doesn't make the trip all the way to London to go there and be just a game time decision or be potentially ruled out late. So he is practicing today. I would expect him to play. If he is out, of course, Antonio Gibson would slot right in as a good play, but Rhamondre Stevenson was RB3 on the week in week 5. Before suffering the injury in week 5, Rhamondre Stevenson was playing at a very high level, so I feel pretty good about how he sets up this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars in London. So final running back flex play that I'm throwing into my lineup to help out my fantasy team this week is Austin Ekeler against the Carolina Panthers. Ekeler was the lead back last week. He had 73% of the snaps. He was getting a lot more of the rushing and goal line work for the Commanders offense. It still resulted in roughly like the same amount of point production as we've seen from him, even when Brian Robinson has been active. The Carolina Panthers, 32nd against fantasy running backs. So it's the easiest matchup in the league. Adjusted fantasy points, schedule adjusted. They are just absolutely giving it away to the running back position. It is setting up to be a great spot for both Commanders running backs. Now, I expect Brian Robinson to play. That's where I'm at with Brian Robinson. I'm still saying that Austin Ekeler is a great start. If Robinson misses, obviously that pushes Ekeler up even more. But he was close to playing last week. It sounds like he's still a little bit banged up, and he's practicing in a limited capacity Wednesday and Thursday so far. Even still, Ekeler is inside my top 25 running backs because of how great this matchup is. And even if Robinson plays, I don't think he will likely resume his full workload like we saw from him the first couple of games of the season. And as you guys can see there, Austin Ekeler has been over 10 PPR points in every single week this season. I don't think it'll be any different in an easy matchup going up against the Carolina Panthers this week. So those are my flex plays at wide receiver and running back. Let's get into some streamers, starting with the quarterback position. The best guys out there for sure are Geno Smith, Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, and Jared Goff. All of those guys, however, are highly rostered. So I'm going to talk about two guys that are a little bit lower owned. If you guys have Dak on bye this week, if you have Caleb on bye this week, go and pick up Drake Maye. As I've already made reference to, the Jags are horrible against the pass. They are 32nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, 32nd in pass defense DVOA. Drake Maye himself also rushed for almost 40 yards in his debut, which was such an underrated part of his prospect profile. So definitely keep that in mind for Drake Maye, that he does run a little bit. He only ended up throwing 33 times last week, but 243 yards and 3 touchdowns on just 33 pass attempts is definitely very solid, especially against the Houston Texans' top 6 rank defense in pass defense DVOA. Very impressive for him. Easy matchup. He is a great streamer this week as a top 15 to 16 quarterback. Daniel Jones is my QB 17 on the week. Giants are at home, so that's good news for Daniel Jones. Eagles are 26th in pass defense DVOA. That's good news for Daniel Jones. Oh, and by the way, Malik Neighbors is going to be back this week, which is great news for Daniel Jones, and probably Devin Singletary back as well to go along with Tyrone Tracy and Wan'Dale Robinson, who have kind of picked up the slack in relief of those top 2 guys being out. We know that Daniel Jones runs. He hasn't yet found the end zone as a runner, and he has thrown 2 touchdowns in half of his games so far this year against a bad secondary with Malik Neighbors back healthy, with Wan'Dale Robinson in there, with both running backs probably going to be back for the Giants. I think they're going to be able to put up points in this game, and I do think they are well aware of the Saquon Barkley narrative that is at play here, who could have a monster game against his former team. And I don't mind the Giants to outright win this game as an underdog, and I think this game will be really competitive divisional game. They're the home team, so I like Daniel Jones there as a good streamer. Moving into the tight end position, for those of you guys looking for streamers at this position, because maybe you have Jake Ferguson on bye or whatever, Dalton Schultz against the Green Bay Packers. He ruined me from nailing a $1,500 parlay last week when a touchdown hit him right in the hands and he didn't end up catching it and ended up getting picked off as a result. But the point is, he's more involved now with Nico Collins out. As you guys can see there, he's been over 80% of the routes since Nico has been out, and over a 19% target share. I like him to command targets. He has 15 in the last 2 games. The Packers are 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. So I really like Dalton Schultz to have a bit of a bounce back performance this week after almost having a big game last week. Didn't quite get there. I do think he will this week. Zach Ertz against the Carolina Panthers, my second streaming tight end of the week. Last week, he had just over 60 yards. The week before, he had a 31% target share. The Panthers are just bad against everything on defense, and they're 26th against fantasy tight ends. 51.5 point over-under in this game. Jaden Daniels could go nuclear, and I want pieces of that offense. So Zach Ertz, also a very, very solid streaming tight end this week. If you guys are looking for defensive and kicker streamers, the best streaming defenses for me this week are the Buffalo Bills against Will Levis. He is an easy target to go after. The Cincinnati Bengals against Deshaun Watson, also an easy target to go after. And then the Los Angeles Rams versus Aiden O'Connell. If you guys are looking for streaming defenses, those three, to me, are some of the best on the week. All three of those defenses are ranked inside my top 5 on the week, but you can also see my top 10 matchups for fantasy points allowed adjusted by schedule to the defensive position. So any ones that I did not say that might be available, you guys can see there. Moving on to the kicker position, here are the top 10 kicker matchups. You guys can see them on the screen there. Austin Seibert of the Commanders, a very, very good streamer. Tyler Bass of the Bills, a good streamer. Jason Myers of the Seahawks, a good streamer. And Indianapolis Colts kicker Matt Gay, also very good. And also, I mean, if you just want to target kickers in high-scoring games like the Commanders Panthers, Lions Vikings, Ravens Buccaneers, those kickers are also very good plays this week. So hopefully I helped you guys get some flex plays, get some streamers, whatever the case is. If you got some value from this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Rest of season rankings, dynasty rankings, all that stuff updated over on flockfantasy.com. Link down below in the pinned comment. Underdog Fantasy, of course, the official show sponsor. If you guys want to sign up over there, promo code FSE gets you up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You can make some pick'em entries for this week's games. I am going to have on my TikTok, I'm going to have some must-start running backs, must-start wide receivers, and I'll have some pick'em entries in there, and I'll also be documenting that in my running back tier list tomorrow. So stick around for all that stuff. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.